Hi, my name is Anita. I'm from Switzerland and representing the World YMCA here. I've met because in Marrakesh. I'm happy to meet you again.
Excellent. Welcome, Anita. You can press there, then it's on.
My name is Lachlan Arts. I'm from the US and I'm the Executive Director of 2020 Morbasa.
Perfect. So, Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Our founder and mastermind.
All right. Thank you, Miro, very much. And let me find my presentation here. You can see the slide okay?
Yes.
All right. So briefly, yeah, my name, again, is Mark McCaffrey. I live in Hungary and have an appointment with the National University for Public Service. Prior to coming to Hungary 2 years ago, I was in California with the National Center for Science Education and helped develop a climate education initiative there. And then before that, I was for 10 years at the University of Colorado at Boulder and helped develop a lot of climate education and communication products and strategies at the university there. But I've been long interested in the international dimension and the potential for scaling up our efforts. Obviously, education and communication often happen at a very local, ultra-local level. Sometimes it's just one-to-one, or in the case of our meeting today, it's the four of us who are in a very small meeting, but hopefully what I have to share will be of interest and relevant to your work as well. And I'd like to just share some thoughts that I presented recently in Vienna at the European Geoscience Union meeting. We are actually working on a paper for the journal Nature that we hope to have published sometime soon about this idea of using the powers of 10 for scaling in society. You know, obviously, we have some massive challenges with climate change. Some of you may have seen the paper in Science recently of Johan Rockström and some of his colleagues talking about this concept of a carbon law, which is essentially saying that we need to cut our emissions in half every decade between now and 2050 if we have any chance of getting close to the goals of the Paris Agreement. But the good news is that we also have some very powerful solutions, and Project Drawdown, which I've been an advisor with, and I'll be talking more about this morning, has actually done the mathematics. You know, they've crunched the numbers on 100 of the top strategies for reducing carbon emissions and sequestering carbon, primarily through agricultural and forestry practices. So I'll be talking more about that in detail, but the good news is that in doing the math, they have found that an aggressive strategy for deploying these different solutions, including wind and solar, some of these agricultural practices, forestry practices, but also dealing with the refrigerant management of super greenhouse gases, HFCs, and so forth, reducing food waste, moving towards a more plant-rich diet, and then very importantly, educating girls and family planning. Those are all strategies that can make a huge, huge dent in the reduction of carbon emissions and being able to sequester a fair amount of that carbon, and getting to the point of being able to draw down greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. So we feel strongly, I think, here at ECOS, the Education, Communication, Outreach Stakeholder Community, that climate action, which is one of the 13 SDGs, really overlaps with essentially all of the other goals of SDGs. But we also feel that climate action is arguably one of the most important, because if we don't deal with the climate conundrum, the climate crisis, then a lot of these other issues are just never going to be achieved. So I was at a conference, it was actually a workshop in Stockholm back in December, and it was focused on social tipping points for deep reductions of carbon emissions. And people kept talking about we can reduce emissions, and they were talking about a lot of the focus being on local and regional scales. And obviously most of the efforts with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement and so forth are coming from the national level. But what about cities? What about businesses, neighborhoods, schools, individuals, and families? And also, we know that individuals can make a difference, although some individuals obviously have more clout than others. Here's a picture of 8 men who have the amount of wealth equivalent to the poorest half of humanity. And clearly they have much more clout than half of humanity, arguably, at least in financial terms. But obviously, the global transformation that is required to deal with climate change is going to require complete transformation of beliefs, behaviors, and lifestyles. And so this idea of using the powers of 10 to help us be more scientific and methodical about how we approach the scaling of these efforts to inform and engage people and to deploy these strategies that Drawdown and other projects have articulated is basically using this exponential scaling that we use in science and mathematics all the time. You know, we use it in currency. There was a film called The Powers of 10 back in 1977 that you can find on YouTube very easily that has a focus on powers of 10 at a spatial level. So we often use powers of 10 to collapse or expand time and space. And we also use it in chemistry. The pH scale is an exponential scale. The way we measure earthquakes is an exponential scale. But what we are proposing here is a somewhat more modified version, simply looking at society from the individual, which is 10 to the 0 power, to the 10 billion people, which is 10 to the 10th power, that are anticipated by the year 2050, give or take. So this is the basic framework that breaks down into these different cohorts. The 10 10 frames plus the individual. So if you include the individual, it would be 11 frames. And you could argue that there's essentially 10 degrees of separation between the individual and the global. Now, I think there's obviously a lot of complexity that gets sort of washed away in this kind of a framework. But for instance, many countries that are part of the UNFCCC are relatively small. I mean, so for instance, the country of Hungary is about 10 million people, which is essentially the size of Mexico City. And the city of Budapest, which is about 2 million people, is larger than the country of Slovenia, which is one of our neighbors. So there's all these countries, but many of the countries are actually quite small, and in some cases they're smaller than even a medium-sized city like Budapest. So we feel that this powers of 10 scaling can help to differentiate and look at how we can intervene, what are some of the barriers at these different scales, and what are some of the opportunities for really informing and engaging people. And just to sort of cut to the chase or give you a sneak preview of what we feel is an important focal point would be around 10 to the 5th power. In other words, about 100,000 people, which would be at the level of a district, you know, medium-sized city, a large neighborhood. So we feel that might be the kind of the sweet spot between the individual and all of the people on the planet. and I'll talk more about that shortly. But one of the things we've done is taken a look at some of the drawdown solutions, which I'll discuss in more detail shortly, and looked at how they fit into this power of 10 scaling. So, for instance, oops, what happened here? I guess I'm missing some of the parts of the slide. But in any event, at the global scale, we have things like the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, which in theory all the countries of the world have bought into. At the billion scale, 10 to the 9th power, we have multinational corporations. At the 10 to the 8th scale, we have national and transnational entities. And I apologize that the slides are not depicting what I thought they would, but I'll fix that in a later version. But in any event, I think you get the general idea that as we drill down, we get to more of a regional and local scale, and ultimately we get down to the level of neighborhoods and schools, so the point is that we do live in a very hyper-connected world, and that ultimately there's connections between these cohorts. Individuals can plug into much larger networks, especially through social media. You know, some of you may have heard this idea of 6 degrees of separation, which was being floated around some years ago. There was a movie about it, what Facebook has found is that within the Facebook world, the degrees of separation of Facebook users is actually much less than 6 degrees of separation. It's 3.5 right now. And so that, in other words, that anybody on Facebook is connected to anybody else on Facebook by no more than 3.5 people, which is kind of astounding. But social media expands our ability to network with these different cohorts, and yet at the same time we need to really look at how each of these cohorts relates to different strategies for reducing emissions. And so this graph over on the left-hand side is based on a concept that was presented at the American Geophysical Union last year by Jane Long, and she was suggesting that there is kind of a regional sweet spot where the ability to act and the ability to have an impact merge somewhere around what I'm proposing is around 100,000 people, give or take. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk about Project Drawdown, and then discuss how some of the Project Drawdown solutions fit into the scheme. And Project Drawdown has been around as an effort for several years now. It's being led by author Paul Hawken, and just about 3 weeks ago, the book that summarizes these 100 solutions that they've analyzed was released. The website is drawdown.org, and they looked at 100 solutions that related to energy, food, women and girls, buildings and cities, land use, transport materials, and then out of those 100, about 20 of them, they didn't have enough data to really do in-depth analysis, but they may have potential in the future, such as marine permaculture for helping grow food and sequestering carbon. And so they put those in the bin of coming attractions. But just to give you one example is that of the research that they did, and this is based first on a very in-depth literature review. They looked at over 5,000 citations from the science literature on these different solutions. You know, one of them being focused on geothermal, and they made certain assumptions which are articulated in the book, and I think on the website. And based on those assumptions, so for instance, in the case of geothermal, it was being able to grow the use of geothermal for producing heat and electricity from less than 1% to several percentage of the overall mix of energy by the year 2050. And as a result, it could save 16.6 gigatons of carbon or carbon dioxide equivalent, to be technical about it. And they also calculated the net savings and the net cost, and they had a ranking based on these assumptions that they made. So geothermal ranks number 18 overall based on the idea that it's going to grow by a certain percentage, and that it'll reach close to 17 gigatons of reduced carbon dioxide by 2050. Offshore wind is another one of the focuses, and it ranks number 22. It could save 14.1 gigatons. Obviously, some countries have really embraced offshore wind in a big way. Some countries like Hungary, for instance, doesn't have any shoreline other than a few lakes here and there. So it doesn't have the option of offshore. But onshore wind ranks number 2 overall in the drawdown analysis. Rooftop solar is another very powerful way of helping reduce emissions. It came in at number 10, being able to reduce CO2 by almost 25 gigatons over the next 30 years with a substantial net savings of energy. And then educating girls came in very high with also with family planning. Between the two of them, the total was close to 120 gigatons, and that's primarily by the fact that it would reduce the population of the world. Good girls' education and family planning could reduce the population from over 10 billion people to less than 10 billion people. Nearly 1 billion people would be not born because of good girls' education and family planning. And that would have a substantial reduction of the potential release of greenhouse gases. Some of the solutions are actually focused on protection of forests in particular and marine ecosystems. So in this case, forest protection is important primarily because not so much it reduces CO2, but because it protects CO2 from being released if these forests are destroyed. And the same with coastal wetlands, where more than 50 gigatons can be protected by helping to protect the blue carbon of coastal wetlands. Food waste turns out to be very, very high as a problem in terms of greenhouse gases, especially in the developed world. In the developing world, or places where people are living on a few dollars or less per day, they don't waste food for obvious reasons. But in the developed world, 30% or more of food ends up wasted, and it's a problem of the entire food chain. It's not just at the household level or at the retail level, but it happens in the fields. It happens all throughout the food chain. And so if there's a big effort to reduce food waste, even cut it in half from 30% to 15%, that could reduce the CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions by over 70 gigatons. And then, of course, it's really important to restore the lands that have been degraded through poor agricultural practices. Regenerative agriculture is a term that might include climate-smart agriculture and some of these other terms that we hear at the international level. But But there's actually a lot of peer-reviewed literature on regenerative agriculture and how it works and how it can be really effective in terms of saving money and in reducing greenhouse gases. Related to agriculture, obviously, would be nutrient management, and in this case, we're focused not on CO2, but on nitrous oxides that are released through over-fertilizing. Of course, most of these solutions are win-wins in the sense that it's not just a matter of reducing greenhouse gases, but if we reduce over-fertilizing from the use of nitrogen fertilizers in particular, then we can also protect water quality in a big way. So the amount of CO2 reduced here, or in this case, nitrous oxide reduced, is not huge, but the savings are substantial, and it's just another one of the important strategies that we need to be focused on. And then, I'm sorry that our friends from China are not here today, but e-bicycles, electric bicycles, are huge in China. There's twice as many electric bicycles as there are cars in China. Something like 90% of the electric bikes in the world are sold in China. They're starting to catch on in other parts of the world, but they are yet another part of the solution. So the Drawdown team looked at several different scenarios. One is sort of the plausible scenario of how we can move towards reducing greenhouse gases in a fairly aggressive way, but actually none of their scenarios depend on having a carbon tax or anything like that. But of course, if there were a carbon tax, it would help accelerate all of these efforts. But in any event, what they found is that food is really the #1 focus for greenhouse gas reductions, which is, I think, a surprise to many of us. So, I think energy was what we assumed would be the #1 focus. And land use is very high as well. So if you combine food and land use, that's almost half. Materials are also important. Transportation is really pretty far down the list, as are buildings and cities. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be focused on these things. We absolutely need an all-of-the-above strategy. But so going back to the powers of 10 approach, how can we tie this all together? Clearly, solutions like district heating need to be deployed at the district level, at the 100,000 scale or so. Educating girls is also ultimately something that needs to be done at a very local level, but it needs support from much higher levels in society. Electric bikes is something that individuals can take advantage of as an alternative form of transportation, and so forth. Farmland restoration, forest protection, geothermal. They're all strategies that can be supported at a local level, but ultimately need the support of nations and in some cases multiple nations. And then how can we track all the developments? How can we track the deployment and success, the progress of these drawdown solutions? How can we start to allow individuals and school groups and smaller entities, smaller cohorts to participate in this? And I think that as Miro can give a lot more detail about, I think one of the clear solutions is blockchain technology, which he can tell you much more about than I can. But essentially, blockchain has the potential for allowing us to track progress on all of these systems, and it can also allow individuals through their cell phones, through their computers and so forth, to track their own individual progress, the progress of their schools and communities, and ultimately, hopefully, be compensated and rewarded for their efforts. One final idea that I wanted to leave you with is the idea of some sort of demonstration projects that could be deployed around the world to help people understand drawdown solutions, help people understand the sustainable development goals and how they can contribute to them. This system here is called IWAT, the Intelligent Water Aid Technology, which a Hungarian company has developed for being able to purify water in remote locations using solar energy. And I believe that if we deployed a system of these around the world at the scale of about 100,000 people per system, per learning hub, we could make a lot of progress very fast. It could be a way of really scaling up our efforts here. So for instance, in Hungary, where we have about 10 million people, if we had 100 of these scattered around the country, maybe 20 of them in Budapest and the rest of them deployed in different parts of the country in villages and schoolyards and in parks and so forth, with people who are trained and who can help adapt the learning materials for the local language, the local culture, it would be a very powerful way of really informing and engaging people. And to me, that's one of the missing links that we have yet to address. That you know, some people understand the challenges of climate change, but many people are apathetic, or they just never had the opportunity to really learn about what they can do to participate in being part of the solution. So the original IWAT system produced clean water from solar energy. It can be used as a medical center and living laboratory. It uses clean battery technology that uses salt water instead of lithium or other caustic chemicals. And so it's really, there's a tremendous potential for using this approach, I think, for being able to, in many parts of the world, provide really valuable services, drinking water, purification, renewable energy that people can come and charge their cell phones or their electric bikes. It could be a place for people to come to get internet access, but also get medical treatment and so forth. And it's a place where they can learn about the drawdown solutions and the sustainable development goals. So if we had 100,000 of these around the world and each one of them served about 100,000 people, we would be able to reach 10 billion people with this approach. So I think a lot of you have heard the cliche, the wisdom of Confucius, who many years ago said that if you're planning for 1 year in the future, you should plant rice. If you're planning for 10 years, plant a tree. If you're planning for 100 years, you need to educate children. The dilemma is that we are really planning for thousands of years into the future as we tackle climate change and all the related sustainability challenges. So we need to inform, inspire, and engage society at every level, but especially with the youth. And with that, I thank you and welcome any feedback or questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mark. This was a wonderful presentation. Really.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, any questions? Christina has joined us. Perhaps you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Christina.
You know already.
Guten Morgen.
So, any questions?
No, I'm going to get that book.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the drawdown.
The drawdown. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, the other members of that were with us in Marrakesh that are here, they should really hear this presentation. I think they'd be fascinated by it.
Yes, we will. It is video recorded, and I will then trim the beginning of, and then we can share it as video on demand.
Very good. Okay, that's great. Yeah, because this is a great resource.
Yes, very good. It's really very systematic.
I would be happy to give it again, but I'll have those slides in the middle fixed.
Right.
Around this. Yeah. We will see, because tomorrow we are not planning to have a morning meeting.
Right.
You could also do a video recording, and we promote the video recording that you will do, no? Because on Monday we will prepare for our press conference.
Okay.
And on Tuesday we have the Climate Olympics focus and gamification, and so I don't know whether we will have a meeting on Wednesday. Yeah, you won't be here. Yeah, so I think there will be no time for another presentation, but it's very valuable, and we have.
Well, I especially would love to connect with the Chinese folks that were at the meeting the other day, because I think China is really a place where this kind of scaling could happen very fast.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
No, the whole concept made very much sense. And we have Evans with us. Hello, Evans.
Hey, hello, how are you?
Brian, good to hear.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I've been very quiet because of exams. Yeah, we are preparing for final exams till June, end of June.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a bit in a fix, but I'm very much with you.
Perfect.
Yeah, I like the presentation, more especially with respect to biking.
Yeah.
Biking is it's more applicable to Africa. Also, the aspect of providing clean water, that's also another very good concept which can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the challenge is I'm sure the Chinese would be willing to, for example, introduce the biking technology to Africa, but the issue is who finances such initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we look at the other technology, the other initiative that you talked about, Mark, this one where you get the returns, where you are appreciated for doing some environmental efforts.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to understand how that works, because it's the issue of the cost. Who bears the cost at the end of the day? Is it the local communities, or is it the Green Climate Fund, or how do someone claim for the efforts and their contributions that they make? Because we are dealing with communities who are vulnerable already to climate impacts, and sometimes maybe asking for contributions from them. Sometimes it may be too much because they are already stressed. Yeah. So how do we help these communities to become much more resilient through these technologies? Because if they are reducing on greenhouse gas emissions, it means that the Green Climate Fund has a role to play in this. That's my contribution. But it's very good concepts. Water, the biking concept, in biking in Zambia is not done. Like if you are biking, more especially in developing countries, if you have a bike, it means that you are poor. Biking is associated with poverty.
Oh.
Yes. So if in as much as we are thinking about this, there are also lots of social aspects, social constructs that needs to be broken down for people to begin to accept this kind of technology. But it's very brilliant presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. And Evans, will you have time on Monday between 1 and 1:30 to join us for our press conference? That you would say a few words via Google Hangout, because I think that we would at the press conference, I would say only something for 1 minute or so, and then we would do it also like via Google Hangout, so that people would also at the press conference see our way of communication, and then Mark, that you make the introduction, but only some 3 to 4 minutes. And then we would bring in Evans. Christina could speak about the Global Challengers Youth Music Contest. I can speak about blockchain and also some resource mobilization issues, and how to build data for the NASCA portal, the non-state actors information system. How can we document their education, communication, and outreach activities from around the world? And this kind of thought I had for the press conference, so that there we show how we operate, what strategic considerations are on our mind, and that we invite more people to join us.
I think that's okay with me. Just write an email sending the program, so that I know the exact time that I'm supposed to speak. Yeah, and then also
you are now in Germany or Belgium, or where are you now?
I'm in Belgium now.
Belgium.
Yeah.
So you are on our time zone. That's good.
Yeah. So also give me a hint of the things that I'm supposed to talk about. You know, I can talk about many things that's happening in developing countries like Zambia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be about Africa.
Okay, no problem.
How climate change, education, communication, and outreach could be promoted in Africa, and what role ECOS could play this platform. How to connect people with Paris Agreement, UNFCCC, and this kind of things.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And I think, Miro, your work around blockchain.
Yes.
Africa would be the place to really deploy this, where the people in Africa would be compensated for the good work they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that could change the equation in a huge way.
Yeah, and I have had yesterday conversations. No, not I. We've had a big round speaking about blockchain and Paris Agreement implementation, and I presented there also our resource mobilization plans and approaching the Giving Pledge signatories and so. And they said they like the idea very much, because they are also responsible for non-state actors in engagement, and that they would we put together a concept note. They will further elaborate it and then communicate it to the climate champions from Morocco and Fiji, and that really the climate champions would champion also our resource mobilization efforts. And with this, the chances that we really get something to build the blockchain technology infrastructure, and also to have funding to incentivize local climate action increases significantly. And so it develops well.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so then we hear again one another on Monday. Also, the Monday morning meeting will be focused on preparing the press conference, perhaps also speaking a little bit about the ACE dialogue, what's there planned, and how we can complement and support it. So it's fine.
Good
for me. Loveland, would you like to add something?
No, it was great to see the presentation.
It was very inspiring. Yeah, and Loveland will speak then on Tuesday also, when we will have this gamification focus with the Climate Olympics. Then we will add on also your presentation. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day, a great weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you, and all the best. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Schoolrooms.